Hello, everybody, and welcome to My Print Hash for week 16 of 2026. As always, I'm your host, Cameron Otsuka, and along with me, Matt Dines. Really interesting developments in the last 2 weeks since we've been off last week. I think the big one that we're going to want to cover this week is Pax Silica. It's a new initiative by the Trump administration and several other kind of components that are coming out from the admin here. But Matt was able to read a book titled Golden Iron over break, and he had some really interesting insights that I think ties together kind of a narrative framework around all of this. And so as we get through each of these weekly news topics that you're all hearing about, I'm sure on news, I really think what Matt's talking about with Golden Iron is going to help you kind of form a narrative around all of that. So to start things off for the week, Matt, you put together a couple of slides here explaining what Golden Iron is and maybe highlighting a few key passages and things like that. So I'd like for you to kind of walk through those. And as Matt's talking for the viewers, I'll be clicking through to different slides that have different highlights that Matt has kind of selected for all of you. But I really think, Matt, if you can jump in here and maybe just summarize the book and then kind of what drew you to it in the first place.
All right. So just to start, Golden Iron is a book written in 1970 by a historian named Fritz. So I tend to, prefer to dive deep into the historical archives, maybe things that, analysts and industry and capital markets maybe have forgotten or never read in the first place to understand history, the narratives, economic progress, changes in power structure, et cetera, that may have been gathering dust on the library bookshelves in the archives. I always enjoy this exercise. So, how did I find this, Cameron, in the first place? So noticeably, right? We've talked about Social Security, the entitlement, cost structure in the U.S. Treasury's kind of budget and how that plays into the federal debt and deficit situation. And one of the questions I asked, just diving deep on my AI models, was, all right, so I know the first state-sponsored like old age pension was actually Otto von Bismarck's Germany, coming out of like a unified German state led by Prussia or Berlin at the center under the monarchy, right, who Bismarck reported into and served on behalf of. And I wondered, okay, when did that state pension actually like collapse and become uneconomic? And the answer, I got was kind of interesting. It was, well, it didn't formally collapse like you would think it would, like say in the U.S. Like there's a long-term trend where a lot of corporate pensions have gone bankrupt and had to been absorbed ultimately into a federal or state backstop, right? That's a topic for maybe another day, another episode. Um, but it was actually the World War One loss and Weimar hyperinflation that just eroded Bismarck's pension system. So I got through like, how did this thing happen? Why was it implemented in the first place? And that led to this book, Golden Iron, right? And to me, the story of why is always what you want to get down to. Ask the Toyota Five Whys methodology, Cameron. I know you like to
Oh yeah.
process things in that framework. Just keep asking why, and you get down to how things happened, and then you can actually make sense of the world and understand it as it is, as opposed to the chaos and disorder that comes with the narratives if you're just trying to make sense of the world through news headlines alone. All right. So the reason I like this book about Bismarck and how he was able to form and structure this unified German state is because it focuses on the process of building it out, but not just from like a military or political angle, specifically focuses on finance as like the key pillar of accomplishing or ultimately what amounts to winning at the geopolitical poker table against your opponents, right? So gold and iron is really a play on the two key resource inputs that were utilized by the key players, Bismarck, and then secondary, and this is a figure who's been forgotten by history, was his banker, this character Gerson Bleichroeder, who has been forgotten by history, essentially just erased, and that comes down to his largely due to his German, or sorry, Jewish roots, also a German citizen. He ascended to nobility. He got the titles. He got the von, by his name. All of that stuff. That puts you in the elite class of society. But obviously, we know what happened with Germans and anti-Semitism in the course of the 20th century. We won't cover that ground here, but his reputation has basically been washed away because of how things kind of played out
Right.
on that front. But slowly, like we'll build this back up and recover how this actually got there. I bring this to today's situation. So we're in the middle of like we're unifying towards something as an old world transforms into a new. I think everybody's clear on that. We're talking about it every week on Mindprint Hash. There's clearly a previous industrial or an economic paradigm, governance paradigm, financial paradigm, you name it, like coming out of the post-World War II order. Since 2008, we've been in that transition into the new world, and basically Cameron and I are talking about it every week in terms of like real-time color commentary, as far as just playing it out on how this is emerging. Bismarck was doing this, like navigating the same situation in the second half of the 1800s in continental Europe, specifically this big power upheaval, economic upheaval, all of that as the two primary waves of industrialization. And then from a political standpoint, you could say the egalitarianism movement that broadened and was sweeping the continent. You could say like UK as well, the US, same thing. Basically, like the way I think about that, we were transitioning from a feudal era where there were the noble classes, the legacy, institutional wealthy, all of that, who are responsible for basically managing society, keeping everything on the rails. And then there's the middle, not really a large middle, but mainly a lower classes where under the feudal era you had basically serfs. Um, and in this transition that Bismarck navigated, those serfs, as spread the egalitarianism movement, the lower and middle classes transition into like a citizen role or an industrial worker type of role, which was just like a huge social upheaval.
Right.
And we're going through something very similar today. When you're in the eye of the hurricane, though, you don't know how it plays out. So, reading this and how the power factions kind of line up against each other, and then you had like what would be considered an A plus go first ballot Hall of Fame talent at like this game, at playing the poker game at the upper like the highest levels, to read about how Bismarck did this and incorporated finance. And he wasn't a financier, he wasn't a central banker, but this Bleichroeder character was his version of that. So it goes through this whole, I mean, it's 700 pages. It's a deep cut, but it tells you exactly how they transition, like they navigated like their hand. They played the hand for the Prussian monarchy and ultimately worked through the other side, victorious in establishing a new order. So we'll go deeper on that. Maybe we'll record a separate like book review episode, but I don't think anybody
Yeah.
wants like today wants me to go 60 to 90 minutes on that. But I'll just stick to a couple of highlights that capture like it foots really well to the era we're in today. So number one, Bismarck, coming from the conservative class, um, he came from the like nobility. He was part of the landed, like the feudal elite, um, and he was the prime minister running the government on behalf of the monarchy, King William, right? And they were fighting for survival at this point, and their opposition was this isn't new or original. We call them the same thing today, the liberal wing, which was really the emergent kind of class of society that were becoming the nouveau riche, um, industrialists, bankers, lawyers. I mean, maybe like medicine, like a new money that was growing on this paradigm, who were then competing with the old elite, but then also very oddly, they want to integrate them. They want to be at the same social strata of society. They want that acceptance, all the above, but they're competing against each other. And then you have everyone, right? The workers, et cetera, and they're being pulled in different directions here. And when your society is going through this process, like all things are possible, like deck cards thrown up in the air, and you basically have to have competent management. Otherwise, this can go very badly, right? We can go through other examples of societies that like just fall flat on their faces here. But the key thing you have to have is competence at the helm and like leaders with a vision to map into to get society to, you know, take one end of the trapeze and jump to the other, and like the Barnum and Bailey circus kind of analogy. Just they got to have something. They got to see that next trapeze bar and then be physically capable of grabbing onto it and taking society along with them for the ride. So this walkthrough of the experience of Bismarck showed a scenario of how that happened. Now, the key thing, like when I was reading this, you can literally see it mapping very closely. Like I could go through the narrative and map onto it in our own post 2008 um, storytelling of the players and developments involved. But I think the key one, um, Bismarck, going after the vision of how do we, get through this thing as a society without face planting and falling flat on our face. Um, he um, like utilized like financial tools, uh, political maneuvers, all the above. But ultimately, once everybody's finances are pressed and stretched to the seams, it hit a point like roughly it was like by 1863 1864 with this conflict in Schleswig and Holstein, just provinces that were at the northwest of present day Germany. They went from like the Danish crown and were challenged and ultimately absorbed into this unified German empire that was coming into existence via war. It had its like it felt eerily similar to what we're going through in 2026 with Venezuela, Iran, and we could just go through the list of like Cuba's what's next, Greenland, like nobody knows. They're just waiting for our modern day Bismarck, which is, the Trump 47th administration, and, and my telling of the story. Um, it was that same process. And going into 1864, Bismarck had like he was controversial. He didn't have like majority approval ratings, any of that. He was an unpopular figure. The country wasn't behind him. They were anti-war, um, anti-Bismarck. And then once this starts happening in 1864, the military, like the war won in Schleswig-Holstein. And in that process, he convinced the Austrian Empire to join with the Prussian Empire and just totally dismantle this tiny little two province state in a matter of days. Same thing we saw, like quick wins, Venezuela, or like Iran's a longer situation. But from a military standpoint, it was, in my opinion, pretty clear pretty quickly how this was going. But he flips that win. Within 2 years, he's gotten Austria to declare war on Prussia. Prussia just cleans the clocks within like a few days as well, and you suddenly got this German unified state that took centuries to put together. It just happens
It
gradually, then
appears,
suddenly.
yeah,
Yeah, and so the public support behind Bismarck and this vision he was building towards, and in the poker game, it was like he there were several moments where like he could have been forced into a resignation. He could have lost several points along the way. But within a span of like 2 to 3 years, 1864 to 1866. Suddenly he exits with like he amasses the giant chip stack at the poker table, and then it's just game on. The whole society is
Right.
behind him, etc. And then it goes to its end game with the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, which did not go well for France. And at that point, it was game, set, and match. So analogy today, you've got the same amount, I think, of public confusion. Well, start with you've got the polarization, right? The same situation that the state was in, the Prussian state, the German peoples were in prior to 1864. I think that's crystal clear here in the domestic situation in the U.S. But now that it's gone to the mats in the situation, like it's gone military. Venezuela, Iran, etc. And it has been for a while, but it's very clear right now. The U.S. government is executive branch and military, and they are facing an adversarial Congress out of. When I say that, I mean like both parties. If you add them up, now that doesn't mean the president and this administration don't have supporters in Congress and the Senate, but they do not have a majority that supports the executive branch and the military is how I would characterize
Agreed.
the situation on the ground
Yeah.
as it stands today. All right. So key thing here, winning begets winning. I think our colleague Dave, when I was running him through my read on this book, he was like, that makes sense. If you think about this in terms of a sports analogy, they said like, wow, this team has such great chemistry. The stadium's full. They're winning. Like everything's great. Like, is it just the players? Do they love getting along with each other? It's like, no, the secret ingredient is winning. Like the stadiums are full, the
Yep.
fans are cheering, they're singing together because they've won 20 games in a row or they won the Super Bowl, right? Like this is just obvious. So I think where we look at this thing today, the Iran situation, um, it is in like who knows what inning we're in, but we're past the fifth or sixth at this stage, I would think. Um, it's starting to come together. We're looking for the closeout, right? It's not over yet, but we've got either the setup guy or the closer, on the mound at this point, trying to wrap this up. But my point here, everybody's worried about midterms, country's anti-war, everybody's confused about what's going on. Take a page from like this thing can change very quickly, and I think this whole order, what we're marching to, like you have to have visionary leadership who is playing this geopolitical poker game towards some end. I think it's very clear at this point, like Cameron, when you put together the themes this week, Pax Silica, we'll get into that in a second. It is crystal clear now what, like, we have an end game that this administration is building towards, and it encompasses like all of the key trends right now: AI, logistics, supply chains, critical minerals, international trade, finance, Bitcoin, like you name it, it's like boom, we got a
It's in
label
there.
for it here.
Yep.
It's Pax Silica. Yep. So Cameron, I think if you want to start a seed question here, but this was actually launched in December 2025. And if I had to compare, we've put up a lot of maps. Like at this point, there's so many new organizations we've thrown at the audience over the last few weeks. Board of Peace, um, I mean, the Artemis Coalition. Like there's so many new bodies coming up for international agreements. You're like, why is this the key one? So if you're looking on it, all the economics that um, um, this administration would view as forming the new backbone of what's going to be built out from an economic standpoint in the 21st century. This encompasses all of that. And if you look at the countries that have signed
I was gonna
on,
say, yep.
I think something very clear stands out. The countries that are missing are continental European powers. The countries who are in, you've got like basically the UK or Commonwealth. So this is absorbed into the the old British Empire franchise, the Anglo-American partnership that took over for that, and post 1913 order. Um, that's absorbed into this. But you've got the minerals producers or the critical resources producers, Australia. I mean, U.S. is in there. But then you've also got energy like Qatar, UAE, etc. Um, you've got the semiconductor production. You got Korea, Japan, um, and then you've got the key bottlenecks here as far as the trade routes are concerned, where we can float ships on water and move all the stuff in the supply chains to build out this new AI world or wherever we're heading. Um, those countries are all in there too. So this is the vision, I think, and it's laid out by Undersecretary Jacob Hellsberg. We'll have his photo on the back end. Um, but he's kind of the point man for putting this all together. Um, so this is what I would call the Bismarckian vision. Maybe we'll call Hellsberg, we'll nickname him Silica Bismarck. Might stick. So we'll see how it
I like
goes.
that.
We still need a Bleichroeder, and my AI model proposed Michael Saylor for that. I'm not going to go there yet.
I
We'll
don't
see
know.
how that one plays
We'll
out.
see.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I'll challenge him there, but some of these figures haven't emerged quite yet for how this next 10, 20 years is going to play out and evolve. All right, now what was the development this week? So I mentioned Pax Silica was announced. We had the first 8 countries sign on to this in December 2025. So this is 4 months in the making. But last week, this is April 16th, we saw the Philippines sign on. And what they committed in Pax Silica was to set up a 4,000-acre special economic zone on the island of Luzon.
Huge.
And they're
Yep.
basically going to be, yeah, it's a huge chunk of land. And it's basically going to be a special economic zone that handles, you can think about it as logistics here. If you think about Luzon as a territory, I have it pointed out on a map here. But going back to like Spanish Empire times, this thing was a key, let's just say, logistics hub for international trade. You've also got low cost labor there, et cetera. You've also got some mineral resources there. So this is a nice key node to add into the Pax Silica framework, and in my opinion. Now, if you go back one slide, Cameron, I've got the slides really quick. Just want to talk about these. Luzon. When you think of Luzon, I think about General MacArthur's famous line. He got basically booted. He lost at Luzon to the Imperial Japanese, and I want to say 1942, and just famously just tuck tail retreated out of there. But on his way out, he said, "I shall return." And there was this famous photo of him. Was it 1945? He's like, "Yep, he made good on that one." This
Marching
is
back
him,
on.
Douglas MacArthur. Yeah, exactly. With the famous recovery there. So what that represented, like Luzon, it's since Spanish Empire days, it's been a key piece of real estate to hold for who ultimately controls the global trade franchise. So to put that piece into this Pax Silica puzzle is a massive win, or a massive addition to a coalition that's shaping up. That is the ultimate vision that I think we're building towards. This is a
Agree.
bigger picture trend, in my opinion, than just one midterm election, something like that, one presidential election. You've got the U.S. military behind it. You've got U.S. capital behind it. You've got those two things picking up partners across the globe into their fold. It's like this thing's a snowball rolling down a mountain that is uh, at this point looks like to me, nothing's written in stone yet, but this is a force gathering momentum towards inevitability or unstoppability. Maybe caveat that, maybe something else emerges, some other competing faction. But this is, if we can just follow this framework, I think it's very clearly coming into being as at this point. I could say years and decades, but it's coming together at this point at like a daily, weekly type of basis as the gradually then suddenly kind of framework, or escalation in events really starts to take hold, especially in 2026. All right. So the next big development here, Cameron, this, like, to go back, we'll talk about the map here in a second, but April 13th, this would have been a couple of days before the Philippines, Pax Silica announcement. April 13th, the U.S. and Indonesia made a statement of major defense cooperation partnership. So basically, they're going to sign up for military modernization and capacity building, training, conduct joint exercises, operational cooperation, logistics, etc. So if you think about the importance of this is also huge. If you think about Indonesia, it's these massive islands. It's like hundreds of islands in the South Pacific. But most importantly, they've got the one that borders the southwestern side of the Strait of Malacca, key choke point, specifically for the trade routes between the Arabian Peninsula, both coming out of the Suez Canal, and then also out of the Persian Gulf. They meet up, they fork. You really got to have this. If you don't defend, if you can't defend the Strait of Malacca, there's other routes through. Like you see them labeled here on somebody's Reddit post. One, two, three. There's other routes up into Southeast Asia, China, Japan, Korea, but all of them go through Indonesia, like Indonesian waters. So this joint defense, like Indonesia is now into this U.S. vision, right?
in the
You
orbit.
wouldn't
Yep.
see this like you wouldn't see this announcement, this MDCP otherwise, right? So they're not in Pax Silica yet, um, but from a defense standpoint, they're in the sphere, um, and I think like this kind of taps into, we've been guilty of this in the past, but hopefully we haven't been overdoing it. But the deglobalization narrative, I don't know at this point that we can say it's a total deglobalization as opposed to a shakeup, right?
Sure.
The old way, the old order, that thing's being, smashed, foreclosed upon, etc. And, in the bankruptcy proceedings, the M&A, the hostile takeover, some new framework is taking over. Um, so at this point, to me, I'd say like, maybe this isn't the collapse of the remnants of the British Empire. Maybe this isn't the collapse of globalization. It's a new era of globalization. There's a new thing that's going to be, unfolding or built out. But I think the key thing, as I kind of foot this to what we've been talking about, like Davos 2026, um, who was upset? It was the continental Europeans. I think the order here, there's going to be some factions of the old British Empire, continental Europe, who are not going to be a part of the ownership class or the equity share class of this new Pax Silica that's being put together. So the one continental European power that is in Pax Silica, we don't need to talk about this deeply at this point, but Netherlands are in there. And if you think about ASML with the lithography machines that are critical for semiconductor manufacturing,
Yep.
they're in the fold as well. So Netherlands in, but your other Northern European powers, maybe UK's in, but a lot of the basis for E3, old capital tied up there. That's its longevity is tied into maintaining the status quo that's now clearly gone. Um,
Right.
you can kind of see this shaking up in real time, and it's getting it's emerging quicker at this point. Like the birth of this thing is like, if it's not here yet, it's the baby's due anytime now. All right. So that's Pax Silica. Cameron, you have any other comments on that? I know Korea, you're talking like the Strait of Malacca. It's a big topic in the headlines locally,
That's right.
where you are this week.
Yep. I
Anything on
think
that before we leave to
no,
the next
I
topic?
think you really touched on it. The piece that I wanted to get across to the viewers is really just these trade routes, right? And so there's been a lot of conversation that I've been hearing or seeing online, things like that. And I'm to Matt's point, I'm here in Korea right now visiting some family. Um, when it comes down to it, if there isn't actual control over these trade routes, none of this works out, right? So as we were going to the grocery store, just to share an anecdote here, the Strait of Hormuz still mostly blockaded. Maybe it's open, maybe it's not. Schrodinger's Hormuz. Um, but the grocery stores are rationing the actual grocery bags, right? So you can't you can go buy one grocery bag at a time per transaction, but you can't go in
Wow.
and say I want two today or something like that. So um,
Okay.
again, just the downstream impacts of some of these things, even if you're able to say, okay, we want to have this broad-based partnership, I think having the Indonesian signatories is critical here. Otherwise, there's no way to actually get any of that oil, any of the minerals, et cetera, over into Southeast Asia without having somebody else, maybe let's say China or somebody, having a say in what goes through.
Yeah. No, that's great. Great color commentary on the ground. So yeah, the way I view this, all right. So the Iran situation clearly not over yet, but it's in the military's hands right now, as well as there's negotiations back and forth between um, Witkoff, Kushner, JD Vance may be on the Islamabad um, U.S. consortium, TBD. But the way I think about that, like we've got the NBA playoffs going on right now, so I'll make this analogy. So coach and players are focused on winning the individual game, which let's say this Iran situation is that. Um, it's in from the general managers or say the ownership of the team. They're comfortable leaving the coaches and players to close out the game, right? They're up by 20, fourth quarter, play it out, get the win. We know how this one's going to go. Um, and then the general manager, team ownership, front office, etc. They're working on let's say the draft or, other bigger picture strategic things being put together. That's how I would kind of frame this broader situation of where we are right now. Um, and then you
Absolutely.
also have the domestic populace, the situation. Everybody's confused right now. We don't know how to make sense of A or B. The the disinformation and the noise. Like I could just name me a talking head podcaster influencer on the geopolitical front. Like better chance than 50-50 that they're dead wrong on this or don't know. They're just injecting noise in the process. Part of it's or a lot of it is potentially by design, who they actually respond to, work for, etc. But that's just the framing, like to set this where we are right now, and a lot is going to change in the next 3 to 6 months. So if everybody's holding their hair, pulling it out, pants on fire, all that stuff, worried about the midterms. Um, I would just say like there's a lot that's going to take place between now and then. So I guess we'll leave that one there. And I think the next angle we want to cover, because we like to focus on the monetary element of um, geopolitical transitions, social transitions, et cetera. I think one of the biggest stories or headlines in the last 2 weeks was this topic of the UAE floating the idea that they would like to have U.S. swap lines ready for dollar liquidity access um, in the near term, just open. So you get into this, the background, right? UAE, like just to start, um, um, the dirham has been dollar pegged at, I want to say 3.6725 AEDs to USD for like 30 to 40 years. We talked about this before, but all of the GCC countries except for one, Kuwait, run a dollar peg on their currency, except for like Kuwait manages a basket, right? So the dollar is um, one currency that holds a weight in that basket, but they don't publish a weight. And when we say like a peg, what does that mean? It means you reserve dollars so that like your amount of currency outstanding is functionally tied to the amount of dollar reserves in terms of capital that your central bank holds, or yeah, like your local banking system, all their reserves aggregate at the central bank level. So it functionally amounts to how much U.S. dollars the UAE central bank holds in reserves. And so what they're telling you here, UAE with their swap line requests, They want to get in the good orbit of the U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve, and this one just kind of is a fart in the wind to the de-dollarization narrative, right?
Yeah.
That's been prevailing on social media, et cetera. Like if we wanted to drive up our clicks, our views, our subscribers, we could be de-dollarization peddlers. But this doesn't really make sense in the context of that. So you want to question why here? Why would obtaining these swap lines and coming into the orbit? And we think about like other countries that have obtained these swap, like Switzerland, Argentina, like they're going to be friendly countries
That's
to.
right.
We talked about the U.S. government. At this point, you do not have a friendly contrast. Like talk about this later in an episode where we can expound further. But I think the core constitutional problem in the United States actually amounts to we have a defunct, deadbeat Congress, and constitutionally they're hard coded in, and there's no way that we can either as the electorate vote ourselves out of this problem or from the executive branch clean up this problem. Like for example, most European governance structures allow for the prime minister or the monarch, the formal head of government, to disband Congress, sweep it away, or Parliament, sweep it away, hold a vote, snap election, we'll get another one in, boom. All right, let's do this. Let's do a redo. U.S., we don't have that, so there's no way to get out of it. But all right, my point here, your opposition to that inside of the U.S. at this point looks very clear. It's executive branch, military, and then I would say we've got an arm wrestling match for control of U.S. commercial banking system, and then you could say Fed, and that's where these headlines of say Jerome Powell, the building cost overruns at the
Yeah.
the Eccles building, Lisa Cook, the mortgage fraud, or the cause for firing suit that is reportedly going to be on a Supreme Court decision released sometime in the mid to near future, right? That arm wrestling there is actually going on within the financial system itself as like some domestic capital concerns or power brokers are trying to pull the U.S. Monetary say structure
System. Yep.
institutions into that aligned power structure that right now is kind of, you see the U.S. military executive branch under current occupants of the White House, and then pull in the Fed into that orbit. But that's the direction that this is going or has been going for, like since Trump descended down the staircase in 2014, right, to announce his candidacy.
Sure.
All right, so UAE is saying like, we need to align with that. Right, same way that Argentina did under Milei, asking for that swap line back in October 2025. Same way that Switzerland did in 2023, as they saw the Credit Suisse situation coming down, that light at the end of the tunnel that literally was the train. UAE, like this is your early indication and warning. Something they are concerned about something like that, like a dollar liquidity pullback. And they want, ultimately it comes down to, you've got to get into the good graces of that domestic U.S. power faction to plug into this bigger picture. And what is that big picture of it? Like Pax Silica, right? And when we say, like, we look at these competing narratives, de-dollarization, deglobalization, it's like, no, these other other countries, they want to partner with this new order, this new vision that the U.S. is leading and focused on. And like at this point, I think that's crystal clear. Like we're getting more and more buy-in, almost like by the week or by the daily headline, it seems. All right, so throw up a chart. This wouldn't be a complete episode of Mind Print Hash without a financial chart. What I want to show here is kind of an indicator of exactly what we're talking about. The liquidity access or flows into that AED dollar peg currency. So top chart here, got the DONIA, the Durham Overnight Index Average. It's basically the overnight money market rate. Like think about like SOFR. in the US since 2018 has been setting the overnight price of secured um, dollar borrowing or financing costs. Um, this is what's setting rates now. If you think about, we talk about Fed funds every Fed meeting. SOFR is the key interest rate. This is the marginal price of dollars. Now, the DONIA, same thing with like HIBOR in Hong Kong. Like for a dollar peg currency, you have to manage your reserves in the kind of global capital markets arena. So to attract dollars in, you may have to raise rates, or if you have a surplus of dollars, you can lower rates. If you don't want more or if your banking system doesn't want more capital or doesn't want to expand credit, whatever. But the key thing here, it's very obvious in the charts here. You plot SOFR in yellow, and you plot the DONIA, the central bank of the UAE's overnight, funding cost or market rate. It's very clear they're just hugging SOFR, right? And they're going to move slightly above, slightly below, but they're just along for the ride. And the center of gravity is very clearly New York, like where tri-party repo rates come in and get aggregated into forming the published SOFR rate for each night's overnight borrowing costs for short-term money market liquidity and the dollar market, right? Okay, so you look at the spread here. I got two charts below. One chart is that difference between the white and the yellow lines on top. So DONIA minus SOFR. If you think about it, um, positive here would mean like it'd be, and these charts don't go back that far, right? So we don't have 30 years of history here. These are new reference benchmarks, new market structures that have been implemented in the post 2018 world, like since SOFR went live. So what I would view as green here, where DONIA is delivering positive spread against SOFR, um, I think that would represent like an ample liquidity environment in the global dollar. Um, and this is a case where, all right, money markets, like the UAE money market, is pulling in global dollars. Like all else equal, you're going to get 12 more basis points if you fund your dollar lending in the into the UAE banking system than you would in, say, the tri-party repo that's publishing or that's printing SOFR in New York. So all else equal, those dollars will want to flow into UAE. Basically, you think, hey, there's growth mode here, et cetera. But then once you see like 2022, when we get into the hiking environment, what was happening, US was pulling liquidity, like when I say you, like New York Fed, Federal Reserve Board of Government, their policy was, hey, we're going to tighten liquidity. What they were doing in 2022, 2023 was addressing the inflation, the supply chain bottlenecks, basically the complete muck in the gears that all of the COVID policy, as well as COVID itself, created in business and supply chains, all of that. Once we switch over to tightening, right, you actually see, oh, well, Fed's raising SOFR or short-term borrowing rates, or when we say Fed, it's not necessarily the Fed, it's actually New York capital, right? Financial institutions, et cetera, are raising the price of dollars. Everybody else in the world now has to march in line behind that. Um, and what you see is that reversal, the tightening conditions. SOFR is now positive or in excess of DONIA, and this is just one apples to apples comparison. Like there's every global money center, not just Abu Dhabi, but London, Frankfurt, Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, like they're all going through this exercise to get access to dollars and the global dollar system. Um, but 2022, 2023, you see that trend reverse. Those dollars want to come into the US as we're addressing the tightening. And now you see, okay, so you see the prior era from 2020 up until 2022, that spread of the UAE's DONIA over SOFR, it's about 12 basis points, right? And it was steady, right? So what they were doing, like it was a business, it was an expansion in the global economy from 2020 up until, let's say, the Russia incursion into Ukraine, February 2022, puts a stop to the global expansion, like dead in its tracks, right? Um, the spread of Donia over SOFR and the overnight funding markets was pretty stable at 12 basis points. Like it's going up and down, but you draw the line there, and it
Yeah.
basically nets out as about 12 basis points. Now, since June of 2025, and I could say what happened then. Well, first we got we got April, right? We got the Liberation Day tariffs, and then by June we did that first exercise in Iran, the bombing of Fordow, Natanz, etc. We really like just put this next phase of, you know, what is the modern day version of Bismarck, taking the military action into Schleswig and Holstein in 1864. Like that process is like it started
It's
in
undergoing.
Q2 of
Yeah.
2025. Yeah, exactly. So now you're looking at volatility up and down, right? But the headline finally hit right now. UAE's like, we want swap lines. Um, what it actually means is they want to align and bend the knee to New York and not London, right? The old offshore dollar market is what's actually happening here, in my opinion. But you see that spread of Donia over SOFR build out, and instead of that, base rate, say 10 to 15 bips, but it's really 12 bips, it's already up near 20 bips, right? And they do not want to get in a situation to defend their currency peg where, oh God, we got to pay rates like way above SOFR. That's going to be very hard on our financial system, our economy. So what they're saying is like, we want to join you. And they're already a signatory of Pax Silica.
Right.
Now, so you've got the government, you got the industrial economy, you got the energy economy in the UAE on board. Now they like next step is bring to heel the financialists, the capital power bases. They want to, I don't know if bend the knee is the right word, but they want to join the alliance here. I guess at the end
Yeah.
of the day, yeah, you got to bend the knee to the Treasury and Fed is ultimately what's happening. Um, so that's what we're looking at here, and that's how I interpret the UAE swap line story. Um,
And
Also, a major development in this process as it plays out.
I think that, that's a good spot for to pause because that's kind of the global side of things. Now, when we come domestically, I think you mentioned to me, the liquidity piece is a key component of all of this. And I kind of wanted to flip us over then to what's going on with businesses and the tariff refunds internally within the U.S., right? So, is this a
Yep.
similar story to what you're talking about with the UAE? It just focused on
Yeah.
Americans? How does this work in your framework?
Yeah. Yep. All right. So the same way, um, I skipped through this section of my book transcript snapshots, but basically there was one quote in there about Bismarck using the foreign activity and the wins being racked up on the foreign front to basically flywheel the advance in his kind of buildup of a coalition, basically splitting, dividing, conquering his enemies, and ultimately building up a bigger support base inside of Prussia, or what quickly became a unified Germany. Um, so I want to like just think about that same process. The foreign influences the domestic, right? I think we're seeing that same thing going on in Iran, all of the global supply chains focusing on whatever this 21st century AI build out. The Pax Silica label is what we're going to stick on it. Um, Domestically, so that all of this is liquidity tightening, right? The pump in Brent crude prices pulls up WTI, pulls up natural gas, et cetera. Um, Liquidity extractive, right? So you're looking for ways, um, from a financial system standpoint, how do you create liquidity? But you also, from a central bank standpoint, some of your tools like short-term interest rates, you really don't want to cut into an like a rising price,
Rising
or
price. Yeah.
as people call it, a rising inflation impulse. Right, you got to wait for that thing to peter out, then you can resume, the downward trajectory and short-term money market rates. Um, there's other creative policy steps like to to the creative poker player here, like there's an infinite number of tools if you can just be, I guess, visionary enough. So if you think about Liberation Day, put the tariffs on, that accomplishes some specific means and objectives for this, you know, big picture play that you're moving towards. Um, the Supreme Court decision, like to strike them down, right now it's actually, well, you kind of turn a headwind into a tailwind here. And what do I mean by that? Well, all of those tariffs now that went to like US importers, right? And turned out a lot of broker dealers, um, distressed claim investors, all of that. They bid from the exporters their tariff claims at pennies on the dollar. Um, Throughout 2025 to anybody who was looking for liquidity. My point here is now post that Supreme Court ruling, which ruled those, I think it was the IEPA tariffs unconstitutional. Well, we're just going to move to a new tariff structure. Okay, rinse repeat. That one gets rinsed down. All right, we'll keep going to a next one. As I said, the root cause of the problem here is a defunct and deadbeat Congress, right? Doesn't matter. Executive branch is just going to keep doing, like, they're going to take creative steps to accomplish their ends and work towards their ultimate objectives. But with these um, claim refunds going out, what that's actually doing, this is creating liquidity in the system. So all of those numbers Trump bragged about in 2025, we've collected this many $1 billion in tariffs, whatever, those are now liquidity injections into
Right.
the domestic U.S. economy and financial system, into like rest of world liquidity tightness, right? So this ends up being a tailwind for the domestic U.S. economy here,
Hmm.
is how it plays out in practice. We'll leave that one there, but this is a powerful force. It's a story here over the last week, but it's a key thing going on within the domestic U.S. economy and financial system as it competes, and the U.S. is, working its way through this whole geopolitical poker game, and working towards its ultimate end, that it's set out to achieve. All right, so that's
Right.
that one, and then all right, the one of the last stories. I know there's a couple more to cover. Um, the admiral, four-star admiral, who heads up the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, or INDOPACOM, um, in a congressional testimony earlier this week, um, leaked or just dripped that the U.S. military is running at least one Bitcoin node. It's connecting operational tests, and it is using the Bitcoin network and the protocol to secure military networks. This is a story, like, I see here I popped up as the news source for reference, Bitcoin.com news. You don't see this picked up by Bloomberg. This was not picked up like Wall Street Journal, etc. It's ignored. It's being glossed over, but this is huge. Like, if you think about, we'll get into the map here. What is Indopacom, right? It covers an area of responsibility that, um, like, is right in the middle of all of the trade nodes, trade routes, financial centers, like
I just think back to
all the
that
key
Pax
real
Silica map.
estate
Yep.
for the Pax Silica. Yeah. So, I mean, you got a lot of dots here for military bases, but I mean, these are a few. The everyday audience member should know these names at this point. So, Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, um, Guam, Okinawa, you got Hawaii. I mean, there's a ton of them to list here, but like, this is U.S. like military, the defense architecture over the like. There's a lot of key pieces of real estate here, like the Caribbean Sea, the domestic United States, Western Hemisphere for critical minerals, all of that. But like Indopacom, right? South Pacific, like, we don't get semiconductor production like without this, right?
You need
Um,
this. Yep.
So the fact, like his tell here, like from a military standpoint, they're using the Bitcoin protocol, which is like it's the financial rails. Like we talked about this in Mind Print Hash. Bitcoin is that hash piece of your financial architecture that your society, your economy, your governance structure can build a not just a stable but a defensible currency on, right? Because what it amounts to, the Mind Print Hash, those are the tools that that societies have historically had available to use and put together a sound currency, right? So that you can organize trade around. Um, Literally said the quiet part aloud. Four-star Admiral, I want to say Sapporo, Samuel, um, his last name I forget. Cameron, if you want to double check on that.
Yeah, I'm blanking right now.
I think it was Sapporo, but he's the head of Indopacom, right? So it already tells you like, oh, this whole build out, Pax Silica, et cetera. U.S. Navy is building onto this like financial data protocol. Which then, if you go back to like square one, what is Bitcoin? It's the solution to the Byzantine generals' problems. You're like, yeah, obviously they're going to integrate here. So they're building on that rock solid, that granite foundation in the first place. That came out of testimony this week in front of Congress, um, and I think it's just an early tell of where this process is and where it's going. All right, last story here. We'll get everybody out of here. This one's kind of funny. It's weird. But Trump administration is nearing a rescue deal for Spirit Airlines, right? We've talked about the investment for, let's say, MP materials for rare earth minerals, critical resources. We talked about the Intel investment, like a 10% equity stake that the U.S. government holds now in Intel to rescue its semiconductor producer. Why would you buy Spirit Airlines here? And yeah, good question. So I view part of this like go back to that golden iron framework. We'll bring this, full circle. I think what you're trying to do politically, you have to divide and conquer your adversary's, base of political support and once you pull those people into your faction, like that's +1 for you, it's a -1 for them. It's like a 2-point swing for every voter you pull over. So every decision here, you can think about, we talk about the build out of the supply lines, the financial networks, all of that. But domestically, it comes down to like rounding up support and shifting over from, let's say if MAGA was a movement that had, let's say 40%, 39% is where you see Trump's approval ratings tend to hover, full time. To get to the other side where you achieve kind of widespread, broad domestic political support, you've got to get, it can't be 50-50. You need like 60-40, 70-30. And once that crossover happens, you're like, oh, yep, that tug of war, one side won it,
Disappears.
American society moves on, and we're off to the races. I think what's going on, Spirit Airlines, it's like, yeah, there could be some logistics here. I don't know, maybe we'll start moving government employees on the ultra low discount carrier pricing in those routes. If you're a U.S. government federal employee, maybe you're going to have to be taking Spirit Air in the future. Sorry to say. But I think about this politically, right? The ultra low discount carrier or low cost discount carriers, um, who uses them? It's what we think of as like the lower middle class of society who otherwise wouldn't have access to, let's say, they wouldn't be able to go take a vacation and get away to, let's say, Cancun or, the Caribbean or, Mexico, et cetera, or just go visit their
See their
family
family.
from Los
Yeah.
Angeles to Miami, right? So economically, that strata of American society, if you start losing the discount carriers, they lose access to cheap travel and they're not happy, right? So if you give them that, if you're the Trump administration, for what amounts to a $500 million check, which we blow through 500 million easily on anything
Probably
else, it
in
would seem.
seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. What you're doing here is you are picking up that electorate block who is, going to skew towards the lower and lower middle class of the population. And I don't want to cross over into the third rail here, but it's not it it's not a what we would think of as like a white ethnic group type of customer base here. Typically, you'd think about it as minorities. So you're thinking African American, Hispanic, etc. So I think what you're actually doing here from a Trump administration standpoint, you're expanding this definition of your support block. You're working down. You're getting the lower class of people to, all else equal, want to lean towards you as opposed to, the prior guard. And the same thing with minorities, right? If you think about this, the like that demographic I just described is what Trump's political opposition here, you think about like Blue America, has largely counted on, and I'd say taken for granted in their support for basically 60, 70 years, ever since the civil rights era flipped um, the Republican and Democrat based coalition inside of the US. So I see this as a wedge divide and conquer move, um, right along with that golden iron playbook. And so it's kind of, this is your example. If you want to use a headline and have something like concrete to point to, this is part of that process. You let the international wins, or the foreign policy wins, which are, it's military now. Like, the gloves are off. We've gone to the mats. It's military is where we are. Um, the foreign policy wins on the international front translate into, you're looking to capitalize those, bring those on your balance sheet, turn that into real equity, and build your domestic coalition of like a voting bloc or support group behind this administration. And you could say, down ballot elections in 2028, or also like just the midterms coming
Sure.
up. So I talked about, for the next 3 to 6 months, there is going to be a massive amount of changes. Anybody saying like, oh, it's going to be a landslide, Dems are going to clean house, etc. It's like, let's wait and see, because a lot is going to take place between now and then. But let's get off. We've gone too far.
Well, I was going to say,
Don't want
I
to
think
lose all our
help me
all
weave,
our
yeah, because
audience.
you've weaved a lot of different, these weekly news headlines, as they come out, it's hard to always know kind of where we're going with all of the headlines. But you were able to kind of weave those into this narrative fabric around Golden Iron. So maybe let's round out the episode. Matt, you put this slide together, showing the kind of move through time from, oh my gosh, I'm losing my window here. Here we go. The move through time from golden iron into what you're calling Bitcoin and silica. So maybe just kind of round out your overall thoughts here to summarize the episode.
All right. So same way, this book, highly recommended read, Golden Iron, by Fritz Stern, 700 pages, right? So give yourself a good like spring break, pick it, like, you know, put it on your bag,
Maybe
and
sprinkle in
it'll
a
take.
fun reading book in the interim
Yeah.
as you're going through each of the chapters.
Well, well, to me, this is fun.
I
So
agree.
that makes me strange. All right. My point here, gold and iron, the two like key ingredients behind Bismarck and his banker, Bleichroder, forming the unified German state that really dominated continental Europe up until World War One. Go into that like down the road. You think about like, all right, that emergent order behind like it being the product of visionaries who are competent at this game, and the two tools they use, gold and iron, right? It's finance and military. I think it's the same thing if you're looking at today. Since 2008, um, this new order that's emerging, if we do it well, we'll go from an old to a new with a bumpy Like there's no other way around it. It's going to be a volatile process, right? It has to be. These things always are in history. But you don't have a full stop or, you know, complete collapse of existing government, society, etc. My point here, if we round it out, I don't know who the two figures are yet. Like in the future, I posted here Jacob Hellberg, who is undersecretary. I want to say of Rubio, right? I think he's in state.
Hmm.
Um, he's the architect here. Might hear us talk about this term Pax Silica. That's his baby. That's his framework. And you got to have a financial sponsor. Still emerging on that one. I threw up four-star Admiral Sapporo. And it's not Sapporo. That's not the
Paparo,
right name.
Paparo,
Sapporo.
Paparo.
Yeah,
Paparo.
Paparo.
Yeah.
Okay, Sapporo. I don't know. It's
I mean,
Thursday, happy hour. Grab a Sapporo, a cold one. All right, but talk about Indopacom integrating and running the Bitcoin product protocol into their defense architecture, which is going to subsume. It overlays onto these Pax Silica trade routes, and then they intersect at the financial layer. My point here, if we zoom out, starting in 2008, like 2008 is the first bookend, right? The financial crisis, all of that. That's where, in my opinion, it became crystal clear that the old order needed to transition into something else. I think you've got a working model now, Bitcoin and Silica, of this thing being built out. And if you think about a cell here, Pax Silica, financial system, you got the stablecoin stuff, dollar or whatever. It is important, but at the end of the day, it's Bitcoin that is your peg where that value kind of subscribes or lives, um, or foots to at the base layer. You've got a you got a compelling product or narrative or vision to bring other nation states, other economic participants, other societies into the fold. And if you think about this as it's an American-led framework, right? As the world has been like the world has wanted American leadership since at least the beginning of the 20th century. That's been abundantly clear. But think about America as a descendant of European culture, European society, all of that as a political experiment. And you think about the competing product offering that this Pax Silica framework is up against. In my mind, the the competing product or vision is, if you think about the continentalists, ESG heavy approach, or Green New Deal, or what's the word? You're gonna eat the bugs and you're gonna own nothing and like it. It's it's a vision that doesn't offer rising standards of living, economic productivity, social mobility, um, like a furthering of human civilizational advances. Like we're talking about with the Artemis project. Like we're gonna go, first step, we're going to build moon bases in Artemis. So you go down in the series, you're like, oh man, they want to put humans on Mars here, is what they're talking about. But it's a bigger vision, and the trajectory that they're selling is up and to the right. And the competing vision out of kind of the European descendants, or those two competing strains, like you talk about the Atlanticist order, the partnerships that are falling apart. Like you can see it in NATO, right? Um, like clearly these things want to go a different direction. But the US framework and product, like it very clearly offers an upward trajectory. And then if you want to, if your competitor is selling 15-minute cities and you'll eat the bugs, it's not hard to see like which one of those is going to win out in the market of ideas and adoption, in my opinion. So I think that's what we're looking at here. We got a good break last week. Sorry, Cameron and I missed a week of episodes for the few people who support us. Thank you for watching, subscribing, all of that. But this was a big 2 weeks behind the scenes. And if you're only focusing on Iran or which tank, like, is there a tanker in Hormuz, got its engine room blown out, et cetera? Yeah, big developments. Um, but I think there's a lot of analysts right now missing the forest through the trees. Um, and there's a lot of things happening, um, and a lot of things that will continue to happen and unfold over the next 3 to 6 months. So, yeah, hope you continue tuning in, and hopefully this framework or our coverage of the action help fill in your own mental models of what in the heck's going on in our crazy times.
Well, with that, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, to X, Substack, etc. It's all Mind Print Hash. Again, Matt, I think this is a really good episode. Helped me put all the narrative together, kind of weave it together into something that's a little bit more understandable, digestible than just sitting there saying, "Whoa, new headline." To your point, tanker just got shot at. Tanker is moving. Tanker is not moving. Right? These are not helpful headlines to put a narrative together. But this, I think, hopefully for viewers as well, uh, weaves the web that helps you kind of pull everything into a solid framework. So that, thank you
Cool.
again, and
Well,
see you all next week. Oh, go for it, Matt.
if we get any support in the comments, if you I tried to condense the golden iron summary down as distilled as I could, but if you all want me to do this, maybe I'll record a deeper book review episode and highlight the comparison 18th or 19th century copy paste over to headlines, developments, events we've seen in the last 10 years. And it will just like raise hairs on the back of your neck, like Annie. Um, there's nothing new under the sign. I know history doesn't repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. But if there's demand for it, maybe I'll record a longer video just diving into that so you don't have to spend your time reading a 700-page book. So if you watch this, let me know. Maybe we'll drop that video or put the work in if people would like to see it. Anyway, thanks, Cameron. Let's sign off.
Sounds good. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good week.